You've seen this happen before, and maybe you hate how fast it happens. Someone brings up a talk you had and your mind goes completely blank. Not fuzzy or partial, but empty, like the moment never happened at all. They smile and reference a detail as if it still lives clearly in you. And now you are standing there performing interest through silent panic. You nod a little too carefully and search for something to recover with. A word, a topic, a place, a single thread that might save your dignity. But the harder you reach, the more the whole conversation slips away. And the shame is not just forgetting, but what forgetting seems to mean. Like maybe you were never truly present, even when you seem to be. But people who forget conversations easily are not always careless or emotionally absent. And they are usually not cold selfish or as disconnected as they fear they must be. What looks like disinterest is often something far more specific happening underneath. The problem is not always that the conversation meant too little to matter later. The problem is often that the brain never stored it in a stable way at all. That sounds small, but it changes the entire moral weight of the experience. Because forgetting stops looking like a character flaw and starts looking cognitive. Something in the moment blocked the exchange from settling into lasting memory. And once that happens, retrieval later becomes a struggle against empty space. The person may have cared deeply while still failing to keep the record. They may have listened, laughed, responded, and even felt moved by the moment. But experience is not stored equally, and memory is never a fair witness. Some minds hold on to meaning while letting the structure fall away too fast. So before calling this rude, it helps to ask what the mind kept instead. Because what vanished as dialogue may have survived as feeling, tone, or tension. During a conversation, the brain is doing far more than simply recording spoken words. It is reading expression, tone, pace, pauses, and the hidden risk inside each response. It is deciding what matters while also managing how you appear in real time. It tracks whether you sound warm, strange, awkward, intelligent, tense, or too distant. It notices what their face does when you speak and what yours might be revealing. And if you are anxious, distracted, tired, or internally noisy, that load becomes heavier. So the conversation may pass through attention without ever settling into memory. Not because you were absent, but because your mind was overworked in the moment. Memory needs more than contact to form. It needs depth, presence, and enough space. If your focus is split, the exchange gets processed in a thin and fragile way. The words are heard, but not anchored strongly enough to survive beyond the hour. Later, when someone brings it up, you are not failing to retrieve it cleanly. You may be searching for something that was never built in full to begin with. And that is why forgetting can feel so total, so sudden, and so impossible to fake. The conversation disappeared early because the mind was busy doing 10 other things. This becomes easier to understand once you stop thinking of memory as a fair system. The mind does not preserve each moment by effort, politeness, or social importance alone. It saves what feels vivid, surprising, useful, threatening, familiar, or emotionally charged. Everything else can pass through awareness and still fail to leave a stable trace. Most conversations are not dramatic enough to force deep encoding on their own. They arrive among distractions, noise, self-monitoring, and a dozen competing signals. So even while you seem engaged, the exchange may be stored at a shallow depth. And shallow memories break apart quickly when no strong link was built around them. This is why ordinary talks often vanish while one strange sentence remains for years. The brain prefers what connects to feeling, pattern, meaning, or something already known. A conversation without that anchor can fade almost as soon as the moment ends. Not because it meant nothing, but because it never crossed the threshold of salience. Memory is selective by design and ruthless about what deserves lasting structure. Which means forgetting can be less about disrespect and more about weak encoding. The mind did not reject the moment morally. It simply failed to mark it as vital. But for many people, the real issue is not weak memory. It is divided presence during human contact. While someone is speaking, part of the mind is already busy reacting, managing, and preparing itself. It is wondering how it sounds, how it looks, what to say next, and what not to reveal. That inner commentary keeps running, even when the face stays calm and socially convincing. So the conversation enters a mind that is crowded long before the words even land. And when the inner world is loud, the outer moment rarely gets encoded with full clarity. This is why socially anxious people often forget exchanges that mattered to them deeply. Not because they cared less, but because they were carrying too much mental noise to hold it. They were listening through self-consciousness, through pressure, through quiet internal surveillance. Every sentence had to fight against anticipation insecurity and the need to seem normal. In that condition, memory becomes fragile because attention is always leaving the present too early. The body stays in the room, but the mind keeps stepping ahead into evaluation and defense. And once that happens, the conversation is never fully lived in the first place. What gets remembered later is often the pressure of being there more than what was said. So the forgetting may be less about indifference and more about a mind too preoccupied to receive. And yet, people who forget conversations easily often remember something else with strange precision. They may lose the dialogue, but keep the atmosphere, the tension, and the emotional residue. They remember how the room felt and the shift in energy when one sentence changed everything. They remember a look, a pause, a laugh, a discomfort, or a warmth that stayed after the words died. Ask them what was said, and the memory may crumble almost immediately under pressure. Ask them how the moment felt, and suddenly the details become vivid, textured, and alive. That is because some minds do not store life as transcript. They store it as impression. They hold on to tone before wording and meaning before sequence or exact verbal structure. In many ways, that kind of memory is not weaker. It is simply built around different priorities. It is often richer in pattern, emotion, and nuance than people realize from the outside. These are minds that notice what changed beneath the surface before they track formal content. They may forget the conversation and still understand the person better than expected. So the absence is not always a lack of depth, but a different architecture of attention. The record may be incomplete, but the human impression was never truly lost. What disappeared was the script. What remained was the substance underneath it. None of this means you cannot get better at remembering what people said to you. Repeating one key idea back in your head can help the moment settle more deeply. Asking one real follow-up question also forces the brain to encode with more meaning. But the shame needs to go, because forgetting does not always reveal a shallow heart. Sometimes it reveals a crowded mind that stores essence more easily than sequence. You may lose the wording and still keep the feeling of who someone was to you. And that does not make you fake cold or emotionally absent in the way you feared. It means your mind remembers people through texture before it remembers them through script. If this kind of psychology speaks to something you have quietly felt for years, subscribe. Because there is more to understand about the mind than most people were ever taught.